everybody. We're at the Imp and the Ogre. My name is Paul.
This is Ryan.
This week we are going to be talking about The Lord of the Iron Fortress.
Yeah, The Lord of the Iron Fortress by Andy Collins is a 3rd edition D&D adventure designed for high-level play, so 15th level-ish PCs, originally published in 2001 and available on the DM's Guild as an electronic PDF. So, the briefest of synopsis for this particular adventure is basically forge masters across the plains are being killed and their souls are going missing. Turns out they're being enslaved to help reforge a legendary weapon of great power. The PCs have to put an end to this threat.
Or not.
Or fail, or become the new evil lords of the Iron Fortress, I guess.
Yeah. Overall thoughts? I don't know. It seemed like an okay high-level adventure. I think it's always cool when in high-level adventures there's like one of the high-level artifacts or things to fight against. Because you hear so much about them in your D&D careers, probably. I don't think there's anything particular like amazing about it or anything that you're going to run and play and say, oh, that was interesting and new. But I think it's got a good theme and would probably be satisfied.
It's okay.
Yeah.
To damn it with faint praise, I think it's fine. It's basically a go to the dungeon, clear the dungeon, save the princess kind of adventure. There's lots of difficult encounters, but there's nothing that really stood out to me either. I would say that this is, or at least felt to me, like a very combat-heavy adventure. There wasn't a lot of challenges that could be overcome without murder.
Right.
There's some, non-combat encounters in it, but it's definitely a kick down the door, fight everything type of adventure, which may not suit every group. I liked the main premise, like the Forge Masters disappearing, the enslaving their souls on an outer plane. That struck me as pretty cool.
Yep.
But I kind of found it boring, which to me is the worst crime a high-level adventure can be, because this is your opportunity to just be crazy, right? Like, this is where you get to do the nutty, fighting of adventure on little moonlets or what have you against gods.
Yeah.
And compared to some of the other high-level adventures that we've already covered, it felt a little underwhelming. So I felt the payoff wasn't quite there for an exciting premise. Right? Like, you're just selling this to me based off of like what your PCs are up against and what the threat is. I'm like, oh, that sounds super exciting. But as I continued through it, I'm like, it didn't really feel threatening enough to me, and it didn't feel exciting.
It falls into the same problems that like every other high-level adventure does, is that you have these tools, but you have to take them away, and you never get to be cool in the end. And it always just feels like it assumes you're going to win, kind of, or that you should be able to win.
Well, yeah, I mean, most adventurers kind of assume that, but I kind of just, I was going to talk about it later, but we can talk about it now, is that I never really felt that the threat or supposed threat posed by the big bad in this adventure actually merits the intervention of a high-level group of PCs, right? Like, I kind of felt that it was a little bit below their pay grade.
Okay.
Right? Like, they're just, the bad guy is a high-level NPC, and he's got high-level buddies, but it really just felt like he was a trumped-up planar warlord that was trying to sort of punch above his weight class.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Like, I really felt that you could easily use the exact same premise and setup for an adventure at any character level, right? Like, you just remove sort of the extra planar aspect of it, and you just make it, Forge Masters are being kidnapped, and you track them back to a fortress where they're being enslaved to make catapults, right? Like, it doesn't even have to be any kind of crazy super weapon, right? Like it's just the main setup felt a little generic for high level PCs and what amounts to a bit of a planar adventure. And in particular, like sort of having done the In the Abyss Planescape adventure, was the last one maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
That we covered. You sort of contrast what I thought was sort of a planar adventure done well to a planar adventure that's fine. Right? Like, I'm not going to say this is a bad adventure, but I don't think it sort of leans into the kind of interesting and cool things that you can do when you take your players off of the material plane.
I agree. The hooks, they kind of suggest that you should weave them in subtly into your campaign. So there was no like, come here, do this hooks, really. You're sort of supposed to find out that dwarves are, one of them was that dwarves are attempting to resurrect a fallen forge master. They can't locate his soul, so you could plop that one in there somewhere.
I mean, basically, there's a bunch that are presented, but they fall into two camps, right? Forge masters are disappearing, either being kidnapped or their souls are disappearing, or materials for forging stuff
are going missing.
Yeah. So you can really go either way. I didn't really feel that any of them were particularly exciting. I didn't think that this adventure really requires a clever or exciting hook because it's not a clever or exciting adventure. I will say there was one hook that I did like above the others, in that if one of your PCs is a smith, so has some ranks of craft, weapon, or armor, which at that level they might, right? These are high enough level PCs that they should be making their own
stuff,
magic items and what have you, that your PC could be attacked by, as we'll see, steel predators, or the main assassins that are used, cat constructs. And then that would provide sort of the instigating event to get the PCs to be invested in trying to figure out. And I think in that type of context, then it no longer really matters if the threat is significant on the planar level. It's more of a personal pride issue, right? So that could work. Also, as a hook that could be used, there's a point in the adventure where I talked about, this is in the future that we'll get to, but that the petitioners, which are what spirits become in the outer planes after they die, but there's a blurb in the adventure talking about how the petitioners sometimes die from being overworked and have to be replaced. And that struck me as not fitting appropriately because I couldn't remember what happened to petitioners that die. So I had to look it up. So this is 3rd edition D&D, but I looked it up. So apparently when a petitioner dies on a plane that's not their own, it just returns to its native plane. So it's like when you're considered extraplanar.
Right.
So similarly, like if your PCs die on an outer plane because they're not a native plane person, I think they just
go back to the material
plane
as a ghost.
I don't remember. But anyways, it's like when you summon somebody, right? Like if you summon an elemental, I mean, rules have changed over the editions, but I can't remember specifically. Anyways, so the petitioners, if they die, they get sent back to their original plane. So you would think that there's sort of a vested interest in the people involved to keep the petitioners alive.
Yeah.
Right? Not necessarily in good health, but at least healthy enough so that they're not dying on them. Now, there's some wonkiness with like a wish or multiple wishes being used to set up this whole scam. So there might be something that I missed while reading this, that the wish also encompasses getting around this particular loophole, blah, 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 blah. Right? I don't know 100% on that. But what I was thinking, though, is that if you sort of use the rules as written, that could actually provide the hook, right? You have a Forge Master petitioner who dies, gets returned to their native plane, and that's what sets off the whole hoopla, right? Because at 15th level, if you have a divine spellcaster, they can have a personal conversation with their god, right, fairly easily. So that might be a way of tying it in with sort of like higher level patrons, instead of it just being like, oh, a shipment of minerals has gone missing, let's get these demigods to go check it out, versus, you know, a planetar appears before you and says, hey, remember when we did that solid for you?
Yeah.
We're calling in a favor.
I kind of wish there was some high-level adventures that were sort of like the end bosses of the game, where there was no like dungeon to go to. It was like a world-ending event was happening, and it was just like you can teleport and try and stop it, and it was like massive lair rules and like all sorts of fun stuff, and it's like, can you beat it or can't you? And that's it.
Well, there's a great supplement. I want to say it's for 3rd edition. It might be 2nd. I can't remember. But it's the Elder Evils supplement. And in it presents a bunch of basically doomsday monsters. And like one of them is a moon, right? It's the afterbirth of the existence of the universe, and it just goes around destroying planets, right?
Yep.
It's so they're crazy like that, or weird monoliths and et cetera. So, but what's cool about the Elder Evils supplement is that these become your boss monsters, if you will. They're the boss of the game, but you never really have dungeons that deal with them. Basically, as sort of the event approaches, right, as the awakening of the great evil old ones approaches, you know, Cthulhu effectively, right, there's signs that present themselves. So like maybe, you know, babies start being born with weird mutations, or, you know, a whole city's populace goes blind. Like there's these types of crazy signs, and then the book also presents some encounters that you can have to sort of tie it together.
Yeah.
But it's not really necessarily, at least early on, going to be the main focus of your adventure, right? Like, it's like if you have a campaign going on, you can have regular campaign encounters, but you start interspersing these weirdness, like very, very much like if you remember when we did Bastion of Broken Souls, that one, where there's the red dragon that's eating the unborn souls, right? And babies are being born without souls,
right? Listless, yeah,
right. Like so Charlatan, I think, is who you end up fighting, but like that's a legitimate big boss guy. Like, but for something like that, you build your entire campaign knowing that if we make it to the end, we're fighting a Charlatan.
Yeah.
And with the Elder Evils, you do the exact same thing. So like you build your whole campaign around the idea is if you actually make it that long, you know, either you're going to teleport to a moonlet to fight, you know, this world-ending thing, or the world actually ends.
Yeah.
You know, it starts raining blood from the skies and blah, 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 blah. Those are the types of stakes that I think you should be dealing with in a high-level campaign, not stolen shipments of ore.
Exactly, yeah. For sure. So I guess getting into it, part one is in Ragus, or Ragus, however you want to talk about it. And this is, I guess, if you follow the stolen shipment hooks, this is where it might end up. I don't know. You just end up here.
Honestly, it doesn't actually provide any type of investigation. It just assumes that your PCs are going to use magic.
Yeah.
You're going to use divination magic. You're going to find the answer immediately. And you're going to be like, oh, we need to go to Archeon.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we get to Archeon? Well, we get to it via the gate town of Ragus in the Ragus in the Outlands.
Mm-hmm.
This whole part is pointless. Like, I mean, there's no real need to go to the gate town to get to the I mean, once again, this is me maybe not remembering the magic particularly correctly, like planar rules, right? Maybe it's different if you enter the Archeon by going through the portal in the gate town versus using a plane shift ability just to
get there
directly,
right?
right? Because regardless, you have to plane shift to get to Ragus to get to Archeon,
Avalas,
right?
yeah.
Like you can't. Yeah, well, Avalas, the first layer of Archeon,
Right.
the infernal battlefield, right? Like they're.
I mean, it's at this point, like, you should be able to find out what's going on. Like, it doesn't sound like it's a mystery in the planes that he would be doing this, you know? So, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean,
like, for me, it's like almost like if it's not big enough stakes for like deities to care, then like it should be probably pretty easy to find out. It's just like a dude going about his business.
it's a pointless, dude. And even like he's rebuilding this terrifying weapon of mass destruction. It's a sword. It's not even that crazy of a sword. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's a super.
It's the blade of fiery might.
Yeah, but it's a +5 unholy keen flaming burst scimitar that's intelligent and has a couple of abilities. Like, you can true scene and can command fire-based creatures or whatever. Like, it's a super powerful magic item.
But it's not going to end the world or tear apart the planes or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, there's no real threat built into it in general. That, like, who would care? Like, why do you care if this item gets built? Like, it's powerful, but it's not.
I also feel like I guess we're just complaining about high-level adventures at this point. But like, if it's something that you can deal with, I doubt that there would be like an investment in the PCs, you know, if like, it's just, you know, if we can deal with this and we're not level 20, like it can't be that big of a problem. Like who's really wants this to stop aside from like stopping the plight of the Forge Masters who have been like all their souls have been like, it would make more sense to be on like a diplomatic mission and be like, hey, are you going to return the souls when you're done? Because then that's fine. You know, if you need them, you need them.
But again, it's one of those situations where, like, I don't know that the weapon itself is a big enough deal that would merit a plot to steal the souls of...
It would be better if they were there willingly. Like, they were petitioned. Be like, come help reforge this great blade. And, you know, Forge Masters, I imagine, would want to be masters of the forge and help reforge something instead of being them, like, taken as slaves. Yeah. And then it's not really a problem, right? You're just kind of, someone wants you to stop this and you have to make a moral decision of whether or not him taking souls is bad or returning them is good. And
yeah, it would be more fun if there was more gray aspect, a gray morality aspect to it than just this is bad. Or it's not even bad. Like, it's just like this. The guy doesn't. The big bad was he a half Dragonborn, Dragonkin or whatever.
In Paragon, yeah. He's the son of a Duergar prince and a red dragon.
There you go. All right, so he's a half dragon, and I don't know, like he's trying to make alliances with like Drow cities and Illithid cities, and he doesn't even have an army.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like.
He's like staked out claim on an empty fortress on one of the rolling continents of the battle plains, and no one cares that he's doing this.
Yeah, he's got like no minions. Like the fortress came with certain minions, like constructs. It's just, but like whoever is the lord of the Iron Fortress has access to these constructs. It's not like he made them.
Yeah.
Right? So it just feels weird in the sense that like,
well, if no one else cares, why do we care?
Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy that, like, all of the, what are they called? Envoys that are actually showing up and dealing with him, like, just say, no, we're not interested.
Yeah.
Like, don't take him seriously, but they really shouldn't, right? There's nothing about what he has to offer. It's like, well, I'm going to make this giant weapon, and suddenly that's going to make me super powerful because this, you know, Jin emperor once had this weapon and did a lot of bad things. Right now, maybe that's the angle we're supposed to be taking, that this is just a guy with delusions of grandeur and nobody's taking him seriously, and the PCs shouldn't really be taking him seriously from a threat standpoint. But I don't know, it's kind of boring, you know, like in terms of what I would want. This might be the last or second to last adventure that you run in your campaign.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, you don't, unless this is leading somewhere, unless you've built this to go somewhere, I don't see much point in it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I'm with you on that. We've talked about it for maybe 10 minutes about why there's no point in this adventure, right?
fair enough.
It's
okay. So let's actually just talk about what's there. So Ragus, the Gate City. There's a couple of encounters that you can have here. One I did enjoy is that the local constabulary is our Mercy Killers, which is a Planescape faction.
Yep.
And what I liked about it is they're just doing their jobs, but they're kind of dicks about it.
Yeah.
And it's an encounter that's designed completely to try to instigate the PCs into doing something stupid.
Which would be fighting them.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it would be, you're trying to get the PCs to break the law, which I'm kind of on the fence with when it comes to these types of encounters, right? Because in one sense, it's kind of funny, to give your PCs the opportunity to do something dumb.
Yeah.
Especially when you have overly aggressive, cocky PCs.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, like, it feels a bit like a trap encounter, right? Because it is. Like, it's completely designed to punish your players for maybe behaving the way that they've always behaved. So
definitely
take it or leave it. Also, there was PCs can stumble upon an attack on a Forge Master. So some Iron Predator constructs are chasing and attacking some guy. I didn't like this as an encounter at this point. Mostly in that if the PCs are in this town, they know what they're supposed to be doing, right? And why do you need this particular encounter? Like, I think the encounter is fine, but I see it more as an instigating encounter.
Yeah,
like that should be what kicks off the adventure.
Investigation. Yeah,
not something that you just stumble upon randomly in this town that you have to be in to get to where you need to go. Other than that, there's just some flavor encounters. I think there's a merchant they can encounter just to
the Afridi can tell them where the portal to Acheron is. It's the other encounter that could maybe be useful there, but your PC should be able to figure it out anyway, I would imagine.
Yeah,
how to get there.
Ragus just felt as like filler to me. And then anyways, so you get to our Avalas, which is where through magic the PCs have found this is where the Forge Masters all are. And to me, like, the best part of this is that this layer of the plane consists of giant cubes floating around in sort of the void that slam into each other. So the PCs need to find a specific cube. Again, magic. It's going to cast a spell and it's going to say go that way. And then they need magic to be able to get to the appropriate cube because they do not start on the appropriate cube.
Correct.
So they need like a flying carpet or a wind walk or something like that. It has to be long distance travel magic because they can't teleport directly there because they don't know where they're going, and the standard fly spell isn't going to get there.
Yeah.
So, there's some interesting filler encounters.
Yeah. You can run into all sorts of stuff on the way.
There's tons of... You can have as many random encounters as you want.
Yeah.
There's a couple of scripted encounters.
You can become allies with the Formians, the ants.
Yeah, I like the Formians just because they're kind of a cool race of monstery, intelligent humanoids that you don't come across that often.
Yep.
And I did like that there's the encounter where you come across Formians fighting...
Slad, is it?
Polymorph sladding, right? So they look like humans that are attacking Formians. So this is an interesting situation because you can allow your players to have some like knowledge rolls that like Formians aren't evil, so what's going on? So it's a situation again where it's kind of a trap because if your players are, human centrists
Right.
and racist against ant people, they might jump in and be on the wrong side, because basically once the Formians are defeated, the Slad just turn on the party.
Yep.
So again, PCs might have true seeing and stuff at this point, so it might be a moot point.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the neat thing about Formians is that not all of them can communicate. So in the fight, if I can't remember, the Myrmidon or something like that actually dies, that's the only way the PCs will be able to communicate with the other ant worker people or whatever. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic that could occur depending on how the fight plays out. And then, yeah, like you said, they can ally with the Formians and the Formian Queen and make a deal, because the Formians don't like the Iron Fortress people.
Yeah, they're getting slain by steel predators and stuff, and it's just not fun for them. I don't know if this whole area, I don't know if this adventure in general is meant to be like an introduction to the planes in a world sort of sense, creating allies and factions and exploring and doing other stuff, as so much as it's supposed to be stopping the formation of the blade because a lot of it is doing extracurriculars.
There's filler, right? I mean, it comes down to is a lot of it does feel a bit filler-y, in that you can do a bunch of things, but there's no real payoff for it, right? It's not like if you do this, then this becomes easier later on. It's just you can sort of wander around and maybe you fight 3 blue dragons.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's 3 blue dragons there, and if fighting 1 dragon's exciting, let's fight 3 of them at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, they play no plot point or anything like that. They're just
there.
You can kill them or fight them, right? Which again, I don't know why. It seems some of the encounters in this adventure feel like bookkeeping. We need to have this many encounters. The PCs need to get this much experience. We'd like them to get this much experience before they get to the castle. So let's put a bunch of encounters so they're level 16 by the time they get to the castle, and then we can balance around having level 16 adventurers that will progress to level 17 by the end of the or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what the breakpoints are. And this is not only a complaint I have about this particular adventure. A number of the adventures that we've done definitely have filler encounters.
Lots.
Where it feels like that's the case. We want this adventure to cover 3 levels, so we need to have this many of encounters.
That's why I was what I was saying earlier, I think it would be better to just be this is a level 15 adventure and encounter. If you can succeed, you're level 16 by the end of it, and you can move on to your level 16 encounter adventure, where there's not I don't think information gathering and travel is particularly exciting in the high levels. Which is a lot of that is involved in these adventures that we've been reading, is still information gathering and travel, and then they add in all these ways that you can't gather information or travel. So then it's why not just start a new campaign with lower characters? Again, but
it's again the usual complaints about how high level magic breaks the game.
I mean, I did like that though. In the beginning, the authors did address using high level divination to gather information, and that you could use, the people that are giving you the information. I can't remember what they suggested. Pit fiends. So it was set up so if you tried to gather information on the fortress itself, that there was an interception, the phone was tapped, so it'd go to the pit fiend who would lie to you or tell you misinformation. So I think that's clever way to do it, but it's still, you're removing their tools.
Well, to make this whole setup work, it involved multiple castings of wish or wish ability. So multiple wishes went into reforging this powerful but hardly game-breaking magic item, right? So it's all very odd from sort of a world-building kind of standpoint as to why this would occur.
Yeah.
Right? He's buddies with this person who has all these wishes they can cast and yada, 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 yada. So it's, This is one of those adventures where it's probably best not to overthink it.
Yeah, just play it.
Unfortunately, I'm an overthinker by nature,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole point of this podcast is kind of to overthink adventures to the nth degree.
Yeah.
So, That's about it. I did like that you get your first of a couple of potential non-combat encounters where you can get information regarding in Paragon and like what's actually happening. So the PCs can encounter a Drow emissary returning from meeting who's on a giant spider,
which is pretty cool.
which is just always cool, right? The Drow priestess doesn't care whatsoever about the PCs, right? So it's a situation where if they shoot first and ask questions later, they miss out on the opportunity just to gain some information regarding what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Right? And it gives you the opportunity to kind of set the tone of the threat, right? So if you take the situation or the idea that maybe in Paragon isn't a big deal, right? Or just thinks they're more of a big deal, this gives you the opportunity to kind of set the stage with that, because the responses that this emissary gives can sort of set the tone for what the PC should expect, right? Because it can give them information about what other evil people, quote unquote, think about this particular threat. And I don't know that they would necessarily put forward their position on it, or specifically say, oh yeah, he's trying to make an alliance with us, but we're not interested. Like, I don't know if it'd be that forthcoming, but it allows the DM the opportunity to paint a bigger picture of Paragon. Because again, with a lot of adventures, especially ones that aren't like parts of adventure paths, like setting the stakes and getting your PCs to sort of care about the big bad matters. And when you're trying to sort of write a standalone adventure, I completely understand that that's difficult to do. Like, you just really can't.
Yeah.
So this sort of gives you a little bit of opportunity to fill your PCs in a little bit on what kind of person Paragon is.
Yeah.
Regardless of the random encounters, you eventually get to the Iron Fortress.
Yeah, which is another do the dungeon type of thing.
Yeah, it's a big dungeon, multiple encounters.
You can find some new friends. I think there's a mind flayer that seemed like I think they were also there to just chat with him, and see what was up. And
there's a pair of them again.
So there's a few of those encounters where you can talk to them. There's a few fights with, I don't know, mephits, and the encounter that I think I liked the most with the blast furnace, where it was you were actually in the forge. Like it because there's environmental factors and you just take damage from being there from the heat, and that there's multiple ways to win and actually destroy the blade in that sense, by either defeating the fire elementals, banishing them, or cooling down the room, which would be like an interesting tactic to use.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's assuming the PCs want to destroy
the blade
at all, right? Because reforging the blade is an option available in here. I mean, all the encounters seem challenging. Like, they'll definitely be difficult. The enemies, especially the ones with class levels, look pretty intimidating. But then again, PCs at the level also are pretty intimidating. And just reading through the stat blocks sort of reminded me like why I don't like DMing high level play, because there's just so many things.
You got too many tools
that can, it takes a long time to do everything, and there's a lot of tracking because there's, everybody's got some level of spell casting abilities, so there's all the buffs, and they got to keep track of like, did they have time to cast this, and if they did, is it active? And then like, it always just provides me the opportunity to forget about things.
Yeah.
To be like, oh wait, no, you couldn't do that. He actually has mind blank on him.
Right.
And, I mean, it's
And everyone's been there before.
Oh, for sure. Like,
oh, that would have hit if I would have remembered to apply my thing. Can I do it?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, we would have died if you did that. But it's and then it just a power struggle of woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Exactly. So you know you're just gonna run into it, and then again, you got to put in the effort to prepare for these major, potentially complex battles, and then your PCs just come up with like some clever situation and just one-shot them, right? Or cast one spell that locks down the enemy, and then they get coup de grace, and then it's over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's why I generally don't enjoy high-level play from the DM's standpoint, because it's just really complex,
mm-hmm.
and that becomes less fun, right? Like, I don't mind there being powerful abilities and whatnot. I don't like there being 20 powerful abilities that 6 enemies all have, so I have to keep track of all of that.
Yep.
So,
I hear you.
What else did I want to mention? I will say that the Iron Fortress is made up of scrap metal scavenged from battles. So it's made up of like bits of like armor and swords and siege weapons and what have you. And
mm-hmm.
thematically, I thought that was really cool. Right? Like, just as a setting, if you will, it looks neat. It is pretty fun. What else do I want to say? I don't know, man. Like, I don't want to just repeat a ton here, but like, you just go through and kill stuff.
It's a very basic adventure. Yeah, there's like, I don't have very much written down about the Iron Fortress because there wasn't anything that really stood out, and it just leads back to what we were talking about earlier. It's like, this doesn't really seem like a threat. You know, if it was a threat, there would be more to his preparations or defenses or something, right? It's like,
it's not hard to get in.
Yeah, you can like walk straight to the furnace, basically. Like,
there's traps. There's lots of. I didn't say lots of. Like, there's enemies. There's some guardian golems. There's some potentially very dangerous traps throughout, but it's very straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
In that you just sort of, okay, which way do you go? We go left. Okay, there's a room. There's this. All right, we kill everything in it. We loot it. We move to the next one. We move to the next one. Which again is fine. Like, I have nothing against dungeons.
Yeah,
I use them all the time. But at this level,
you should plop in there, and it should be like an epic fight against in Paragon. Really.
It could be, right?
Why would he tolerate you cruising through the castle and killing people he's recruited or potentially recruiting and moving on? Like, you'd think you'd have an awareness about that.
Well, it's also like, at this level, I mean, this is 3rd edition, your players might have cohorts and followers and armies of their own, and just like they could show up with an army and there'd be no army.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then I would feel, as the DM, behooved to
also have an army.
Right?
Yeah.
I guess ultimately it's like, I would never run this adventure, and there's nothing really in it that I would steal.
Yeah.
You know, like, other than maybe the main hook, like the taking of the Forge Masters, that idea of needing the expertise to reforge something is cool, but like, I think it would be cool as a hook that if that was your PC's challenge, like, your PCs need to reforge an artifact.
Mm-hmm.
How are they going to do that? Oh, they need to get information from the person who made it, but they're dead. Oh, so we need to go find their soul. But maybe their soul's missing, because how did they get so good at being a forge, a smith? Maybe they sold their soul to a pit feed, and then suddenly you have an adventure where your PCs are actually, breaking into the abyss, or the 9 hells, to rescue the soul of, the greatest smith of all time, so he can help, or she can help them reforge this artifact that you need to be able to stop the end times,
Yeah.
or prevent blah blah blah, right? Like, and to me, like, from my own personal aesthetic, that seems more appropriately epic of a quest line.
Yeah, I agree. That would be better and more satisfying, I think, than, like, I just feel like your players would probably be a bit unsatisfied with this adventure if this is the thing that you chose to run when they got to this point. Maybe they would like it. I don't know.
I mean, I think it fits in a certain aesthetic. I think if you like running location-based dungeons, and that's what your group likes running, this is just another location-based dungeon, right? So you could literally just pick these and run them for every single party level, if you will. It's just, for me, taking a pretty standard dungeon and just moving it someplace interesting isn't enough, right? Like, putting in the Outer Planes, to me, mostly just feels like it was done to make it feel high level, to make it feel different.
It does it does feel like an adventure that you would just pick if you were starting at this level, kind of like, oh, we want to see what it's like to play 15 level characters. It's like, this is an adventure for that because there's a bunch of encounters. It seems like if you were running it, there's not very much on the fly kind of stuff, you know. It's just like, well, now you're here and then this happens and then you can go there and then this happens and you can choose to do that. It would just be like, it's almost like you'd test out a toolkit being here, as opposed to actually having to use the skills that you have, or like DM appropriately at that level, because it's all just there for you in a package. It's like a prepackaged adventure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of it.
Yeah,
right? Like, it's I mean, it does what it does fine.
Yeah.
Right, like, I don't want to make it seem like it's a poor product or anything like that. It's just, it's not satisfying to me in my particular, what I like in an adventure. Also, like, it's kind of boring to read. So, like, I think a lot of us out there get adventures because they're fun to read, and you like reading the backgrounds and the stories and the ideas behind it. And I really felt that there wasn't very much of that in this adventure, even from just like, who is in Paragon?
Yeah.
Like what is his motivation other than, like, he wants to?
Yeah. Just to be strong, I guess. I don't know.
Like, there's very little background information behind a lot of the NPCs involved in this whole major plot, which, you don't need any of that to run an adventure. Like, it totally is sort of a blank slate. But from reading it, like, I like reading adventures that have a little bit, I mean, granted, it's like kind of like a fine balance. Like, sometimes they get a little too novel-y and you're like,
yeah,
okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
But
there wasn't really any backstory.
There wasn't really any. So there wasn't any sort of interesting, like why would I ever want to steal in Paragon as a big bad and want to use it in my own campaign?
I don't know. He's got a neat name.
He's an Imperial Dragon. He's an Imperagon. But yeah, so like, even just from like ideas to steal, it's kind of like a little on the low end for what we expect. And in all fairness, I chose this to do based off of length, not off of like any particular recommendation. I wanted a shortish adventure because I didn't feel like reading too much.
Well, it's hard reading big adventures. Sometimes it's hard reading any adventure.
Well, it's a shame, right? There's a lot of really great ones that I'd love to do, but it's some great recommendations. But like, it's 300 pages long. Like, was it the Eyes of the Stone Thief?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, super cool adventure. Not ever gonna get done because it's
just too much to read.
It's too much to read in a short period of time, and condensing it down into 45, 50 minutes isn't practical. I didn't really enjoy when we did the what was the one, Red-Handed Doom, when we had to break that up over two. Like, one was super long and then one was sort of regular length. I didn't really care for that, so I don't think we'll end up doing any
big ones,
which is kind of a shame because a lot of the 5th edition newer ones are all campaigns. So if we end up doing any of those, it would definitely be like, we'll do chapter 1 of out of the abyss or what have you.
Yeah, a small portion of it.
But anyways.
Well, that went pretty quick because there wasn't much to say about that.
It just didn't spark my imagination. And it's not like it's not bad enough that I can just like rail against the travesty of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like really bad adventures and really good adventures, there's tons of stuff to talk about, and this is just sort of fine. Like it's okay. And an okay adventure is not much to say. Like I think.
Well, and there wasn't anything that was amazing that we could talk about and why we enjoyed it or why it was cool or why it was interesting either. So that's
yeah. I mean, yeah.
You know, it gives you that meh sort of vibe about the adventure.
Yeah, I mean, and there's some specific aspects about it being in like the outer planes, but we just talked about that in the last adventure we did, so I don't feel the need to repeat ourselves so quickly.
Well, all right then.
Anyways, yeah, this is getting boring to listen to.
Yeah.
As much as it is to talk about, I'm sure. So,
thanks for listening, guys. As always, you can get us theimpanogre at gmail.com or at theimpanogre on Twitter. Next week, we're going to be talking about There Is No Honor, which is from Dungeon Magazine 139, written by James Jacobs. Thanks.
bye.